We are part of the Fired Up Sports Network of shows. Please check out other Fired Up Sports Network podcasts like the P-Lot Pod, Water Cooler Talk, Bell Smashers, Philly Sports Love and Pain, Drunk on Broad, Beer Battered Sports, and the Fired Up Sports Show, which are available on all major podcasting hosting sites and social media. Also, check out Mark Ramos' Roundup on firedupsports.com, which breaks down the happenings going on with all your favorite local teams.
Philadelphia Eagles are Super Bowl champions.
E-A-G-L-E-S Swing of the miss, struck him out. The Philadelphia Phillies are 2008 World Champions of Baseball.
Ladies and gentlemen, the Flyers are going to win the Stanley Cup. The Flyers win the Stanley Cup for the lead. Yes!
Iverson, wow, what a fake off Daniels as he broke his ankles and got all the way to the cup.
Well, good Sunday morning. It's episode 263 of Drunk on Broad. And Drunk on Broad today, we're going to mix it up a little bit. Recently we've been doing some very sports specific shows, but today we're just going to kind of dive. We're going to go old school. This is the OG version of the show where we just kind of meander through, all the Philadelphia sports teams coming off, probably what was maybe the best Eagles season in my lifetime, maybe in team history. And coming off, the other sports teams are coming off breaks, right? The Flyers are coming off the winter break where they're playing the Four Nations tournament, and the Sixers are coming off a All-Star break in which I don't even know if they knew they were back from the break. But we're just going to kind of, and the Phillies are starting spring training. So we're going to kind of dive into what this city's teams need to do to join the Eagles in terms of getting back to that parade on Broad Street. But today I got our writers in residence. We've got Mark, who's been doing some writing for the Fired Up Sports Network, covering the Flyers and Union with our behind the scenes press box coverage. And Eric's doing some great writing for That Ball's Out of Here. And both of these guys are co-hosts on our shows. So gentlemen, welcome in. Good morning. And let's talk all things Philly sports.
Yeah. How we doing, Don?
Hey, listen, I'm bathed in Eagles Super Bowl gear, so that will soften the blow for as I'm watching the Sixers game last night, bathed in an Eagles Super Bowl sweatshirt and hat, and kind of longed on the days of when I thought my premonition of Joel Embiid riding on the front of a school bus down Broad Street holding the Larry O'Brien trophy is gone. But in the afternoon, watching the Flyers, kind of take care of business and embark on, they're kind of in the middle of that rebuild. It's I don't know, it's kind of a weird place to be. And the Phillies are coming off of, I went back this morning on Netflix and I was rewatching the Trey Turner piece. That's it's only 25 minutes, but it was a really good kind of reset into like just how close this team is, and just how good this roster is. And I think the lack of the flashiness of the offseason, because they didn't make a ton of big moves, kind of tempers people's expectations because they saw how busy some of the other teams were. I don't know. It feels like I'm kind of like I can't lose right now.
Yeah, we're at a good point. I see you're still wearing all the Eagles stuff. I've officially moved on to my Phillies wardrobe now. With spring training.
Listen, I did break out the red sweat. I had my red Phillies.
There you go.
I was about to say my Phillies Super Bowl sweatshirt, my Phillies World Series sweatshirt. But yeah, I've like you, I've started to bring it back in the rotation, but I just couldn't resist today.
Yeah. I mean, I was wearing bird stuff for the last couple months and everything. So it's but with spring training starting, like you said, Don, I mean, there was a lack of flashiness from the off season, but at the same time, this team is close, right? It's just like things that didn't go, the things that went wrong, are things that um, I guess are fixable, right? You have a good lineup. You lost a couple pieces in the bullpen, but I think with signing Jordan Romano and bringing in, and then they're just really going to rely on Kirkering, I think, to kind of step up in that back end, see how that goes, and then they're saving some stuff maybe for the trade deadline. I think see what they have in the first half and then go from there, because they do have a lot of the pieces kind of in place already. It's just relying on those pieces to step up and actually make things work.
Yeah, I think there are some very under the radar moves, right? Their pitching staff, starting pitching staff, you could argue is top three in baseball,
Absolutely.
which in this division is going to be really important. You need and Eric, this is not I'm not going to break any news, right? This is stuff that we've talked about for forever, but like you're going to need your big guys to step up.
Yep.
And you're going to need those guys in the lineup. And I heard, I can't remember if it was Todd Zalecki or Matt Gelb, one of those guys talking about like the reason why they probably didn't go as heavy in the offseason is they're going to wait to kind of see what they need
Yep.
at the trade line as the season kind of meanders. Which I think is a solid approach, considering you went from the World Series to the NLCS to the wild card. Like you're it's not trending in the right direction. You kind of want to start at the wild card and kind of be trending towards the World Series. But I really do think like they do have a lot of pieces, and they did do I think like a really good job of like retooling, their roster. They didn't get a chance to make a ton of big moves because they have a lot of big name guys. But like, Mark, talk to me about Luzardo, right? And talk to me about how like you bring in guys like that to your pitching staff, right? What does that do for this pitching staff? Because he now on most teams could probably be in your top two, top three, and he's going to be your number five.
Yeah, I think he's that was the kind of gambles I thought they should have been taking this winter. Like here's a guy like Luzardo is somebody who's shown in the past that he can be good. I think what was last year he kind of struggled. I think last season his numbers were up, but like to kind of shore up the rotation that way, knowing that it's already a strength, and as you guys mentioned, like you need that in this division with the Braves and the Mets, and I like I mean I really like it. I mean I don't. It's nice knowing that they're going to shore it up that way. There's they have guys waiting in the wings, right? Like I think Painter's in the wings there, like with the pitching, and I like it. I like Luzardo. I think that's because it's like I'm still under the impression, and in all sports, right? There's no such thing as a bad like 1 year deal, right? Like
Right.
you can flip the guy if it doesn't work out. If it does work out, you know, um, you have an asset that is helping you, and then you can explore things later. Whether it's extension or whatever. But I like it. I thought he was a good addition. I was like low key excited about it when they got him, and I'm excited to see where that goes this year. Because it's definitely their strength. I'm also interested to see how this lineup kind of works out because I've heard a couple different things about that and where guys are going to be 1 through 9.
I mean, you didn't give up a whole lot, right?
No,
I mean, you gave up prospects, but you didn't give up anybody who was like on the verge of being an impact player. Eric, talk to me about Andrew Painter and where and how you kind of see his ability to to have an imprint on this team, because you do have like we'll talk about that, and then like I want to talk about Ranger Suarez because I have something that's kind of out of the box, but maybe it's something that I could see Dombrowski doing.
Yeah, I mean Painter. I think one of the reasons they went out and got Luzardo is so they could take their time with Painter. Right, you need to have a solid 1 through 5 getting there because they're not going to rush him back. I mean, he's not even pitching in any spring training games this year. He's throwing on the side mounds and side fields and everything. But that's what they should be doing, right? I mean, he's still only 21. You don't want to rush him back from anything and make it a necessity to have him. Let him come back on his own. I think he's probably going to end up staying in Clearwater a little bit longer after the season starts, just to kind of ramp up. I think they should have him, get started in, double or triple A, wherever they feel comfortable starting him off at, just to work up, against some real competition. And Dombrowski's been saying around July or so, but it could be June, it could be August. It really depends. I mean, I think injuries are going to play a big factor too. Like Luzardo, love Luzardo. I was thrilled with that move, but the one knock on him is his injury history, and I think that's why last year he did struggle. Right, he had the back issue, he had a shoulder issue, I think it was. He says both are good now. He seems to feel healthy. He seems to feel confident. But it's baseball. You're always going to have you need depth in that pitching staff. So having Painter waiting in the wing, and whether they want to go a 6-man rotation, a little bit of August, bring him up and get some of that in to give some of these guys some rest and less innings toward the going into the fall. There's a lot of different options they can do with him, but I mean, you bring him in now, and you were saying that we have one of the best top 3 rotations in baseball. Yeah, I mean, I think you look Dodgers, Mariners, Padres have a decent rotation, but I mean, the Phillies are right there. I think if you put this rotation up against anyone, I think they can hold their own. So, adding Painter to that will only make things better.
Yeah, the bringing Painter up in the late summer, early fall seems like it's like a Braves kind of thing to do, right? That you bring a young, your top of your prospect pool up at a time where you can make that addition to your roster without having to give up any assets. It's an internal move that, and here's my Dombrowski under the radar move. We know that Ranger Suarez has new representation in Scott Boras. And we know that Scott Boras is never going to leave a penny on the table. Is Ranger Suarez dealt at the trade deadline as part of like a huge package to get like a big name guy? Because you have the addition and the ability to be able to bring up Andrew Painter and slide him into that 5 slot. Is that something that could happen? Is that a deal that they like? And again, this is going to be something that they need to kind of meander throughout the season and see how the lineup plays out, see how things are going. But is that something that could be on the radar?
I mean, I could say I wouldn't say never. I just think like starting pitching depth around the league is so thin right now, and I think that obviously, like we talked about with injuries and everything, if anyone's injured, I don't think they can risk moving him. Also, like you look at his playoff resume, and it's just like he kind of stunk toward the end of last season, right? He had all those injuries and everything after basically being a potential Cy Young Award winner through April. By July, August, he was kind of, I don't know if it was dead arm or if it was a little mixture of all those different injuries that he had.
True.
But he's still like, even in the postseason, he had that one start and he was erratic, but he got out of everything. And just looking back, it's like you kind of want a guy like that, I think, if you plan on making the postseason, because he's so versatile there. You can use him as a starter. You can use him out of the bullpen. But then again, if the right package comes along and he's not going to re-sign or he's going to cost too much money to re-sign, and you can get a nice package back, it's one of those things I think you have to listen to.
Yeah, I think I agree with that. I think and you mentioned it just now, Eric. The one thing about Ranger that I always love about him is just he's always just this. Just always.
Mm-hmm.
Not a lot of up and down, and I think that's something come October, you can turn getting yourself in a jam I mean, especially against some of these teams you run into, depending on who's hot at the time and all, like you work yourself into a jam, and like that can turn into like a 3, 4, 5 run inning, by the snap of a finger. And he's so good at working in and out of those jams, and he just never like he looks the same as he is when he's dealing, like, and he's uh that's like a really valuable quality. But I do think like that's going to depend on uh everything, like we just mentioned, right? Like, what does Lazardo look like this year? How well is he pitching? Where can we get Painter where is he at the deadline? Is he ready yet? You know what I mean? Like, that's
Mhm.
still there's still enough runway in the season, and like I feel like in a baseball season where even by the trade deadline, there's still a lot of baseball left. You know what I mean? And
True.
things can change going into October. So a lot of things up in the air at that point. But yeah, I mean, you said it, Don. I mean, Boris doesn't leave any change on the table. He's
Yeah, I mean, it has me wondering. Like, they're also not going to want to let him walk, knowing how much of an asset he is. Like, as we're all talking about it,
yeah.
and wanting, knowing what that number is going to be, and knowing that it's going to cost what it's going to cost, and not wanting to let him be in a situation where he's going to walk away and you get nothing.
Right.
It's just I don't know. It's just something that, like, as I'm hearing people talk, I'm thinking like, all right, like, Andrew Painter's not in the picture, completely different conversation. Um, I just wonder. It's something that, like, I wonder how that kind of plays out. The lineup, the lineup, top to bottom is it's gonna look a lot like it did last year. What does this team need to do to be able to get to a parade? Because this team right now, you're going to have to, even in just your own division, just to get to the playoffs, you're going to be battling the Braves and Mets all year long. Braves are going to come back healthy. They're not going to be nearly as injured as they were last year. Um, the Mets are top heavy in their lineup, don't have a ton of pitching, but the team that made about a million moves was the Dodgers. And that's the team that I think you're ultimately going to have to kind of fight through. What, Talk to me about what this lineup needs to do in order to kind of propel this team moving forward.
I think the big thing is limiting chase rates, um, putting the ball in play when you have guys on base. I mean, I think that we saw it in the playoffs last year, right? I mean, everyone got cold at the same time, pretty much. But we've also seen what this lineup can do when they're being patient and these guys are firing on all cylinders. So it's like you kind of need to figure out a way to balance it so that you don't have everyone kind of go cold at once. In the playoffs, who really the only guy who was hitting was Castellanos.
Mm-hmm.
But you had Turner, you had Bohm, you had Romuto, all being capable of, of having a quality at bat in October there. So I mean, I think one of the things that there's been a lot of talk about is shuffling the lineup around a little bit. And Don, we've talked about it a lot. I was a big proponent of Schwarber leading off. I mean, he gets on base, he can draw walks, but I think what you have to look at now is how the Mets pitched around Harper basically the entire series because there was no protection behind him. So I think now I'm willing to see. A lot of people are talking about possibly Trey Turner being a leadoff guy, putting Bryce 2, Bohm or someone 3, and then hitting Schwarber 4, which then does give you that. It makes pitchers have to pitch a little bit more to Bryce because you got Schwarber coming up behind him, who is a threat to put one in the seats every time he's up. So. I think shuffling the lineup around a little bit, seeing how that works might not be a bad thing, and seeing if you could get Bryce a little bit more of that protection because Schwarber is like our big power guy. We've loved watching him hit home runs this whole time, but Bryce is really the guy in the lineup that this lineup's built around, and we need to get him as many potential put him in the best situation to hit
Yeah.
every single time, because he's the clutch guy, right? He's going to come up and he's going to get his clutch hits. You just got to make sure that he gets pitches to hit.
Yeah, I think, and Mark, you can talk about this a little bit. Like the idea that, like I heard Todd Zalecki talking about, Harper likes to hit third because it gives him the opportunity to see two guys ahead of him get a series of pitches, and it helps him. But part of me also thinks about Shohei Ohtani bats first because that gets him the most opportunities to get the most at bats in a game. What's your approach with the beginning of that lineup?
I kind of like the idea. I think I don't remember who was using that as a talking point here, like coming in the spring, but I I like the idea of Baum being in that third spot and moving Schwarber back to, I think you said 5, Eric, right? Like in the
I like 4 better because just he gets
4.
more at bats in his season than
Mhm.
Oh, right, yeah, yeah. So like, I mean, I kind of like that idea. As you mentioned, like Otani, like I mean, he's hitting first, but I mean, like I I like the idea of maybe Baum in that spot, and like even in a down year, right? I think he had 80 RBIs last year. I think Baum had, like, even like in a year where he wasn't like great. Like we didn't consider him like having like all that much of a consistent season. But like, yeah, I mean, it is built around Bryce, and they need to like find a way for him to get his swings at the plate. You know what I mean? And the that's going to happen in a situation where everybody's going cold at the same time.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, like, they ain't going to pitch to him if they don't have to. You know what I mean?
That's
And
the
like,
truth.
it's just, I wonder too, like, if it's just, and this might be a good question for you, Eric. Like, I think, them going cold all at the same time, is that like a matter of just guys having all the same approach at the plate? Like, it kind of feels like it's very like, it doesn't feel like the lineup's super diverse in the sense that like we have a lot of guys that swing for power, I feel. And I don't know if it's a lineup thing where it's like we have a lot of guys that have the same approach at the plate.
Yeah, no, I do totally agree with that, Mark. I think a lot of people put it on Kevin Long, and obviously he can help give these guys ideas about approach and everything. But ultimately, look at our lineup. Like, there's not many young guys in there who you're gonna like mold, right? Like
Mm-hmm.
Bryce is already Bryce, Schwarber is already Schwarber, Cassie's already Cassie. Like, you're not gonna get, but the lineup is constructed with a lot of the same type of bats, and that's the problem you run into. Like, if they're all hot, awesome, right? You're going to have a really fun summer, and we saw that, right? The first half of last year,
Yep.
they were
Yeah.
like, his offense was potent, and then you get to Realmuto gets hurt, he kind of never comes back and really has the same offensive capabilities. Bohm gets cold by the end of August, and then is kind of a non-factor for most of the rest of the season. So you got to kind of figure out a way to, and they talked about this last season too. I know they talked about changing the approach, using the whole field. It's like, well, I mean, shouldn't that have already kind of like been the approach? And if that's the case, why are we still not doing it? But again, you have these guys who are, most of them are all, they're all vets of at least, 5, 6, 7 years.
Right.
Like they have their approaches, right? And you
Right.
see they have success. So like, you can't tinker with it too much because you don't want to completely ruin a guy's swing or, what's in their head when they're going to the plate. But I think the biggest thing is, using the whole field's big because, they're going to wait and see pitches a little bit more. But at the same time, it's just like how much you can't really teach an old dog new tricks in this sense.
Mm-hmm.
And it's just like, so I don't know. I mean, I don't know how you fix it other than just saying, trying to cut back on strikeouts, trying to let the ball get a little bit deeper and everything. But the capabilities there, it's just, maintaining some consistency with it.
Right.
Yeah, I think if you can get Trey Turner to be what he was in DC and LA, that changes the entire lineup.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
If you can get him, hitting to all fields, stealing bases, going first to third, I think that really can kind of change the trajectory of how this lineup can operate. Him not being able to do that, really does kind of hamper it. I mean, there was a period of time where he just became like an automatic out, and the fielding was bad. So like you were
Yeah.
getting it you were kind of getting it on both ends. I don't know. I'm curious to see how they manage the DH. I'm curious to see how the additions of like a guy like Max Kepler and how that can again it's another left-handed bat, but like how that could be something that this team could kind of use as a balance of a guy who can put the ball in play at the back end of your lineup. Um, you're going to have the rotation of Brandon Marsh and Johan Rojas in center field. I'm curious. I'm curious to see, and kind of coupled with the teams that you're going to encounter on that playoff run.
Right.
Teams like the Mets, the Braves, and the Dodgers, right? And the Dodgers just seem to have signed everybody under the sun, and have deferred money into the next eternity. But it's just I think that you have what becomes really important in a playoff run is the pitching, and I think that's where their starting pitching is their strength. So here's the question, fellas: can they win one in the next 5 years?
I think they have to. I, I think you have to, because at that point, you're gonna have an old Bryce, an old Trey. You'll have other guys kind of being put in, in supplementary, like having cheaper guys like Painter and Miller coming up, maybe Crawford. Um, but I mean, you look at this window, and I don't. I think some people at the end of the last season kind of overreacted a little bit on like the window closing. I mean, these guys, they're still like, most of these guys are still kind of in a prime, or at least like have another year or two within it. Maybe a couple guys are exiting, like JT and Cassidy to an extent. But I think you kind of have to look at like this next like 3 years, like this year, 2026 and 2027, as kind of like your go all in right now type seasons, because it's not going to last forever. Wheeler pretty much is going to be done after this contract, it sounds like. So you got to maximize what you have with him. I mean, being one of the best pitchers in baseball right now. Nola's only going to get older as his contract ages. So I think you really got to look between now and 2027, maybe 2028. But I think when we get into by like 2030, this is going to be an interesting situation. So yeah, it's got to happen within the next couple of years, or else it's going to have to be like a completely different core of players who do it later on, I think.
Yeah.
Mark, what do you think?
Yeah, I agree with that. I mean, like it's really, I mean, we're really close there. Like in terms
Yeah,
of that this has to. I think that's where a lot of the frustration came from this winter with people was like, like when you step back from it, sure, it's like let's go into this season. We know we're going to be there. Let's evaluate as things come to us. You know what I mean?
mhm.
And maybe someone becomes available that we didn't think was going to be available, and we can strike at that. Whatever the case may be. I think the thing though, going into the into the off season and it kind of being somewhat of a quiet off season, I think was just like, I think we're looking at it like, we only have so many years of Bryce here being the player that he is, and I think it would be really devastating. I think, like as Philly sports fans and stuff, looking back at the career Bryce has had as a Philly, arguably one of the best players they've ever had play for the organization, and it just the playoffs be littered with missed opportunities or not being able. I look back at the year like against the D-backs, and that feels like such a missed opportunity again. You know what I mean? And like things like that. I mean, that would be really tough to stomach. Looking back and knowing that they had such a great player and that they weren't able to get over the hump. I mean, it has to be, as Eric said, it's got to be in the next 2 to 3 years. I mean, they have to get over the hump
Mhm.
and win one to, you know, it'll be a lot easier to stomach, beyond if everybody's
Yeah,
still under contract and we're all kind of, you know, we're kind of filtering in the Crawfords and the Millers and the Painters and stuff like that. If there's if we're only a couple years removed from a title, I think people will be a lot more forgiving. If the team's not that good at that point.
Right.
But it has to be these next couple years. I mean, they have to look at it because, as you mentioned a few times, Don, like, I mean, the Dodgers are spending with both hands. They're spending with your hands. They're spending with everybody. You know what I mean? And uh, that's kind of their motto right now, right? Is to pay.
Yep.
We're going to pay to win, and they do. And so it's a tough thing, and plus they're in a tough division too. Like
Yeah.
we mentioned with the Braves being healthy again, um, they're not going anywhere. The Mets are also a team that they're not afraid to spend and go out and pay guys and stuff like that. So um, it's tough, but they're going to have to. These next couple of years are they're really important for the Phillies. They're really important.
Yeah. Listen, gentlemen, better home run hitter, Saquon Barkley or Bryce Harper?
Man,
Didn't think we were going to have to answer that question, but it's listen. I think that they have the ability to be able to do it, and I think they have the motivation to be able to, kind of get all hands on deck. So I'm curious. I'm curious to see, and we want to treat every Phillies game like it's an Eagles game. It's one of our downfalls. We will overreact to a Wednesday night game in Colorado for absolutely no reason. But I think that they have the ability to be able to. I'm curious to see throughout the season how this plays out, but they definitely have the talent. They definitely have the horses to be able to kind of get this thing done. And I think you kind of take it for what it is. But their window out of the three teams that we're going to talk about today, their window is the smallest, and it is going to close. As the guys that you have under contract, Eric, as you were saying, as they're getting older, right, that window gets smaller and smaller. And I think you might put John Middleton that if he really wants his trophy back, he might have to spend a lot to be able to get it. So I'm curious. I'm curious to see where this goes. But Mark, with a team that's got a little bit of a longer window, team that we know that is, the Flyers are on a very different trajectory, right? We know that, Jonesy has kind of, he and Briere have, kind of stayed the course over these last couple seasons in terms of, their approach to getting this team back to prominence. Talk to me about the state of the Flyers in terms of where they are and where they're going.
Yeah, I think for the Flyers right now, I think they're a team that, after the Frost and Farabee trades, I think that kind of felt like a primer for they're planning. I think they're looking at something, in this coming summer, whether it's like an offer sheet or something. Like they seem as though they're getting they're like looking at ways to be creative, which I think is really what the fan base is asking for at this point. Is like, you know in order to kind of like break through to that you know uh, that play to break in the playoff contention and further,
Mm-hmm.
it's going to take like a little bit of creativity. They have a ton of draft capital this year, but at the same time, this draft is not seen as like a really great draft. I think there's a reason why teams are uh, willing to move the 2025 first this year. It's I don't think a lot of teams, especially teams in contention currently, those picks mean even less to them because I think it's seen as like I've read that it seems like a 15 player draft this year, in terms of like real difference makers or potential difference makers. So I think they're looking at something. I think they wanted that above all else, with the Frost and Farabee trades kind of being the most recent marker. They're looking at the flexibility was what really mattered to them coming into that. And So we'll have to wait and see this summer because
Mhm.
they're pretty much in full. I think here the rest of the way, they're in pretty much evaluation mode. Going into the summer and into next year. So, but it definitely seems like there's an appetite to get creative there, which I think is a good thing because it didn't really feel that way coming into the year.
Yeah, and Mark, to kind of talk about the draft picks a little bit, right? Because you're talking about they're going to have the Oilers pick, they're going to have the Avalanche pick, and they're going to have their own for all three of those. They're going to have 3 first-round picks,
Mhm.
and then they're looking at 4 second-round picks. If this draft is, as people are describing it, as top-heavy as it is, how many out of those 7 picks? How many of those picks do they actually make?
I
And do
think,
they package them to try to get as much of that top end talent as possible?
yeah, I think that they're going to try to do that. Um, as far as the first round picks go, it wouldn't surprise me if they went up to the podium all 3 times and made those picks.
Okay.
Um, and the second round picks, I think, are. I don't know if they're going to use them as draft, if they're going to actually use all 4, because that seems kind of crazy to use all 4. Um, but maybe they try to package some of those to move up, to get a player maybe they really like or something like that. I don't know that like they're going to be able to package like 3 seconds, 3 firsts, and bring in like a number one centerman. I don't think that's gonna. You're probably looking at reclamation projects or guys that have shown that maybe a capability to play in the top 6, but uh, haven't really, whether it's consistency or other things have happened. Like I think of Elias Pettersson in Vancouver. There seems to be like he doesn't really seem to want to be there, and the Canucks really are okay with moving him. And it just kind of seems he wasn't great at 4 Nations. Like I think there was just there would be a lot of
Mhm.
question marks in a trade. Whereas like I just don't know that they're. It's a feeling. I don't really have anything to base it on other than I think they're gonna the 3 first round picks. I think they're gonna make those picks and maybe just kind of shuffle around some seconds, maybe to move up or trade down or something like whatever becomes available on draft night. Um, I think that's kind of where they're going to be, but I don't think there's going to be much. I wouldn't anticipate them packaging like 5 picks to get the first line center. I don't
I
I
got
don't
you.
know that that's going to happen.
But Eric, talk to me about like a guy like Patterson who is in Vancouver. The situation kind of is what it is. How many of those like if you were to like you've got 4 second-round picks and you've got 3 first-round picks. What type of package gets it done for a player like that?
See, I don't know because, like I said, like it all depends. I think on how teams value those picks, and like Mark was saying, this draft isn't necessarily deep, so I don't know. I guess it all depends on each team's like valuation of the picks and who they like in the draft and everything. Um, so I mean, at least obviously, at least it would have to take at least one of their firsts, right? And a couple other things maybe. So, but the thing is, like with Pedersen, like Mark said, he didn't have a great showing in the 4 Nations. It almost seems like there's kind of like mixed reviews on a guy like him. So I don't know like how much you want to give up for stuff like I think the big thing that they really need is that number one center. And like Mark said, I don't think that's like what we have right now is going to get that. So I think you just kind of have to be patient. I mean, what the Flyers have been really good at doing, I think, is like tempering expectations. And they keep saying, like I think the rebuild is working, right? I mean, kind of this year they make it as a low seed, cool. If not, no one's really expecting much. So I think they kind of have some time to kind of play around and kind of evaluate. Mark, you were saying that's kind of what the rest of the season is going to be, and I think that's kind of the smart thing to do, and just kind of see what they have already, especially with the trade, the return on the Frost and Farabee trade. So it's tough to say what it would take to get a guy like that. But yeah, they have the capital. Like I said, I think it just depends on how teams value them.
Mm-hmm.
It's interesting because it's like I do kind of wonder, Mark, and as you were saying, like and Eric, the patience has been something that's been wildly impressive to the deals that they made at the deadline last year to kind of you know give away guys to get assets. When you talk about the deals that they made at the deadline last year, and I look at where they gave away those guys. Not gave. I shouldn't say gave away. They traded away those guys, knowing that it was going to negatively affect the performance on the ice, but knowing that that was the best case scenario for them moving forward was to get those assets in house. Mark, who are the guys right now that are in that same position? Guys that they probably will trade away, will negatively affect the team, but will get this team more assets.
Yeah, I think right now, I think the big names that are kind of like circling are Rasmus Ristolainen on defense, and then up front, a player like Scott Lawton, who teams really seem to value. I know the Flyers certainly they
Mm-hmm.
love him. He's an incredible teammate from all accounts, and um, everybody loves playing with him. I don't think the Flyers have ever had a coach that's coached them that didn't love him. Um, and those are some guys I think that like and maybe it's not even picks. Maybe it's more like getting somebody in here that a young player that's kind of like I think of that. I think back to like the Giroux trade, and you know
Mm-hmm.
they deal Claude, they get the first, and they also get Tippett back in return. And maybe the pick wasn't like super super valuable. It was going to be a late first rounder, but they get a player that like they like and that they can work with and is young. And I think there might be something like that there with whether it's Ristolainen or Lawton or maybe even both. They're able to maybe grab a little bit of draft capital, but they're going to get a player back and somebody who can kind of contribute on the current roster. Um, I think maybe they'll be looking at something like that. I know that teams like Detroit, they're looking for defense. I believe they had scouts at the game last night, the Red Wings. So they were looking, they're probably doing their trade deadline prep and,
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
take a look at some guys. And I think the Maple Leafs have been connected to Scott Lawton. So,
Okay.
um, among other teams, I think the Winnipeg Jets are another team, although they don't have, I don't think they have enough cap to absorb that. There'd have to be other moves made. But
Okay.
yeah, like I think those are the two names probably at this point. I think everybody else is kind of, I would be surprised by anybody else other than maybe like a small mid round pick move for like a guy like Eric Johnson or something like that.
Okay.
But other than that, I don't think the Flyers are going to be like super, super busy on deadline day, but those are probably the names you're going to hear. Uh,
I mean,
Getting
you can
into
tell
that.
like with them, like they dealt two guys that were pretty popular, right?
Mhm.
In that deal to Calgary when they deal Farabee and Frost. So as much as Scott Lawton is beloved in the city on the ice and off, um, this leadership is not going to let that stand in the way of trying to get what they need to get. And listen,
Mhm.
the Flyers are hunting for what everybody else is, right? Like
Right.
they're hunting for a number one center to be able to pair. So, Eric, what is the importance of pairing Mitchkov with that guy in terms of to elevate this team to that next level?
I mean, I think you just see how versatile Mishkov really has been, right? I mean, I think you pair him with a number one center, and how that's number one is going to help him develop because he's still so young. But also, like, just think about having someone like that on the power play, and just what it's going to do for like that top line. Um, I really think like we've seen a lot of glimpses from Mishkov. Obviously, like it's kind of I know he's been tired and everything because it's really his first time playing this much and everything. So he's had a couple of rough patches, but overall, what we've seen from him, I think, has been really impressive. And you give him someone in his second or third year now in the NHL to play with, and I think you'd really get to see like how special he really is because I think he is pretty dynamic offensively. So you give him someone, and I think like the sky's the limit for him then.
Mark, and you've been down there a lot. There's a lot of points being left on the board with plays that Mitchkov has set guys up. Even a couple of them yesterday.
Yeah.
Where and he's still right in that top 3 of rookie point leaders, even with all of those points left on the board. What has been the most impressive thing seeing him in person as much as you have? What's been the most impressive thing about him so far this year?
I think, I've heard people describe him on Twitter and things like that as he's like a hockey genius. And um, I don't think that's like hyperbole. Like he really is, he sees the ice in a way that like few players do. And I think in addition to like what, like a quality, uh, the Flyers are going to, if they can get like a top line player to pair with him, they're going to do that obviously. But I think if you're like looking at a player, it would be nice to like if you had the ability to do that or to get picky in some sense. It would be great to be able to pair him not only with a top line player, obviously, a top like a number one centerman, but also a player that like one of his best qualities is his hockey sense, because that's one of Mitchkov's. I think that's why it works with kind of like he looks good when he plays with Sean Couturier. And I think it's because even though Couturier's physical skills may not be what they were, he still thinks the game at a very high level. And I think that's why that works with Michkov is because they see the same things. And I think like being able to pair him with a player who like is not only top level in terms of like physical skill set, but also a player that's got a reputation for being a very smart hockey player, that could be like a really, really dynamic pairing that we could be watching for the Flyers in the playoffs for the next 10 to 12 years. You know what I mean?
Right.
Um, he's like, I think that would really be the thing that sticks out. It's like you watch a play develop and you see a passing lane, and even right before you see it develop, the puck's already there when he has it. It's really incredible, and he's a special player. He has real star level potential, and he's one like if you're looking for any reason for optimism, I tell people that friends of mine that aren't huge hockey fans, but they're like they're interested in going to games and things like that, and they know the team's not very good right now. But I'm like, if you want to go down there and watch, like go buy a ticket to watch Mitchkov because he's worth the price of admission, I think, um, and so far he has been, So I he's very very special. He's a special player.
I mean, and to be honest, right, we're talking about a kid who's just 19.
Yeah,
Like he is that skillful at the highest level of professional hockey, and he's just 19. Like just 19. He's been playing in the KHL for a while with grown adults and performing at a high level there. When you talk about his ability to be able to affect play on the ice, it is wild. It is wild to see how he can pass guys open. He can get guys the puck in little to no space at all. Um, and I'm curious to see how that translates when he is paired with another guy who also has elite talent.
mm-hmm.
Um, and I know they both play right wing, but like a guy like Mitch Marner, right, is a guy that's like I don't know how like I know he's going to be a free agent. I know that his, from everything that I've read, is, his goal was to kind of stay in Toronto, but like that's a guy who's got like next level talent.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And, is there a guy in mind, Mark?
Like I really like Mitch Marner. I think there's going to be, if he makes it to market this summer, he's going to have a ton of suitors, and there's going
Yeah.
to be teams that are either in contention or close to contention that'll be able to pony up and pay him. I'm not even 100% sure he's going to leave Toronto, to be honest, but like,
Yeah, just the thought of like, again, I know they're both right wing guys. I know that but I don't know, just like a guy like that to be able to pair with them.
yeah. Well, Marner could play center too. Like he can play center and wing. So you could slide him
Now
into
we're thinking out of the box, Mark.
it. Yeah. You could technically put them together. I mean, like it's Marner can definitely play center. Um, and it's part of like one of the many skills he has. Is like he's
Mm-hmm.
versatile in that way. Um, and he would step in here. It would be interesting, right? Because I think he's on a Toronto team that's perennial playoff team, but they've struggled and getting over the hump. And Toronto is that's a tough market. It's hockey 24/7 there, and I think maybe to
Mm-hmm.
come to a team like the Flyers where there's expectations, people care about the Flyers, but it's not quite like Toronto. And where like I think that could be a nice like a nice segue for him if he wanted to
Mm-hmm.
maybe step out of the spotlight where it's like on you 24/7, whereas like the you come to a place like Philadelphia, it's like the Flyers are a team that people are really excited about, especially when they're winning. You know what I mean? But um maybe it's just not as bright, it's not as like on top of you as it is in Toronto.
Yeah.
Um, and yeah, I mean, he's an interesting one. I know that there's players like Marco Rossi. He's a restricted free agent this summer with the Minnesota Wild. I've been a fan of his game for a long time. One of
Okay.
the things I know he's having a great year this year. Minnesota might have to move around some money to make he's do a big extension.
Okay.
Um, and he's the type of player, as we said before, about like hockey sense and things like that. I think pairing him with a player like Mitchkov could be really fun. They could be a really like fun dynamic group or duo to play together. Um, but Marner's interesting. I definitely think if the Flyers should definitely be all in on him if he's available this summer. Um, and I think there's still going to be like there's other guys in trades that I think are kind of like we talked about uh, guys like in trades and things like that. Um, we mentioned Elias Pettersson, but there's also guys like with the Ducks. There's Trevor Zegras. His name's been out there. He's another center wing. He can like pop out play wing, but he can also play center. Um, another skillful kid that I think he's struggled recently, but he a lot of people have struggled in Anaheim with the Ducks. So
Yeah.
it might be a change of scenery type of thing. So
True.
I there's definitely like there's definitely going to be some options this summer if they want to like if the Flyers have like a real appetite to make a trade. I think they'll be able to. Um, but it might be more of a reclamation project and not like an out and outright number
Sure.
one all situations first line center. So, which and a team in their predicament, I don't think that's not a bad gamble to take.
No, I think they're going to be in a good spot. Eric, talk to me about how important it is to kind of put a bow on this. Um, how important it is for them to solve the goalie position in the be as this team starts to transition. Um, they're going to have to discover whatever that option is, whether it's internal or external.
Yeah, I mean, it's pretty precarious because obviously like the whole Carter Hart situation really screwed them over because Urson looked like he was a really solid backup. And he's shown glimpses of being good. I don't think he's like a number one goalie though overall for like a contending team. I like him though, but yeah, I think you're probably. I don't even like depth wise. Mark, you can correct me if I'm wrong here, but I don't think there's like any like goalies kind of like knocking on the doorstep outside of Fedotov hasn't been great, Kolosov hasn't been great, so they're gonna. I think they have to look externally. I don't know what that looks like, or when and where they look at that, but I think they're gonna have to do something. But the thing is, they have time, right? They kind of have we said, kind of segueing from the Phillies thing here is their window is like kind of just opening, I feel like. So they have some time to figure that out. Like, I don't think they're in a big rush to solve that yet because they're not contending for the cup next year. So I think they have some time, but I think they're going to have to probably look externally, I think.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I think maybe in a stopgap kind of way, like maybe for a couple years, like a guy that can definitely like start for you. I agree on Eric's assessment of Urson, though. I think he's probably better suited in like a tandem, like a 1A, 1B kind of thing. He has moments where he's really, really great, and then he has moments where he's not so great. So I could totally see that. And as far as like, I think like internally, they're more like they have another Russian goaltender in the system uh, that is apparently very special. I don't know how quickly he's going to get over here, but that's something that I think down the road. But in the meantime, if you can address that with like a veteran guy that has starting ability, I think you could probably definitely find a guy like that, or at least somebody you can pair with Urson in a 1A, 1B kind of thing.
Mark, it's almost like we've done shows about the Flyers together before.
Yeah, we've done a few.
Literally on the second screen, I'm literally looking at a guy that I was going to say, like, I want to put this guy on your radar.
Yeah.
Igor Zavgragin.
Yeah.
I forgot about him.
He's 19 playing in the KHL. And at 19 in 28 games has a 2.83 goals against.
Yeah.
And has a save percentage over 0.903. Last year's KHL stats were 0.94. For him to be doing that kind of stuff at 19 in the KHL, just saying, it's just a guy to put on our radar, and right, could be kind of hitting his stride. That the word that I hear that I hear other people who are in the know more than I am, is that they're probably going to have, you're not going to have the same situation with Mitchkov where they're going to let him go early. This is a guy that they're probably going to hold on to, and based on the Flyers situation, they're not going to be real pushy to get him over here.
Right.
So I don't know, just a guy to kind of put him on the radar. Gentlemen, a little bit bigger window.
Yeah.
10 years? Is 10 years an appropriate window, Mark? Can we get one in 10?
Yeah, I think in 10, I could see that. It's been hard in recent years to envision that, you know what I mean? Like, because when you're in the crux of the games and, in the slog of the 82 game season, it's hard to sometimes envision like what it could look like, in the future. I could totally see that though, especially in the next couple summers. I think if they're able to, the one thing about the NHL, and I think this year has kind of shown it when you look at how jumbled the Eastern Conference is and stuff. A couple moves here and there can really kind of like snap things in place. Like it can you can turn yourself into a playoff contender and a team that can win a round like pretty quick. And then like from there, who knows, like when you, once you like get into the playoffs and then you start looking to, take the next step as a group, it's like, I don't know if that's the point system or maybe it's just the teams the talent's real spread out or whatever the case is. But I feel like in recent years in the NHL, you can get, things can turn around real quick, So um, 10 years, yeah, I think that could totally happen. We could definitely get a summertime parade.
Eric, what do you think?
Yeah, it's funny because like I feel like I love watching the Flyers even like through the rebuild. I'm trying to find things like be excited about, right? And Mark, you were mentioning like how you have some friends who aren't like big into hockey, and I've been doing the same thing. Like watch Mishkov, like it's
Yeah.
fun. They're on the right trajectory, but I always think back to like just like how other than like 2010 ish and all that like that I just feel like this franchise has been stuck in like such a period of like mediocrity where they'll have some good teams come up short or they're just like always get for a few years there they were always getting in as like a low playoff seed. Sometimes they'd make a little run, but it's just like I have a hard time envisioning it just because it's been so long. I would love to see it though, and Mark, you hit the nail the nail on the head. I would love a summertime parade. I am done freezing my butt off at these parades. So
Yeah.
give me a June parade, and I will be thrilled. But yeah, I mean, I think 10 years is a reasonable is reasonable. Just because it's a lot of time to make moves. You have like we said earlier, Mishkov's only 19. You can kind of start to build around that. Think even in like 5 years, he's only going to be like 24. He's still going to be a pretty young player. So
Yeah.
they definitely if they can put the right pieces in place around him, I think they can do it. I would love to see it just because it's been so long for the Flyers, and I would love to see Flyers hockey like back on the map, especially in the spring and summer. Watching Flyers playoff hockey, like there's nothing better than it. So I would love to see it.
I sure hope so, fellas. 50 years.
It's been a long time.
They're going to celebrate the 50th anniversary of the last Stanley Cup in 1975.
Yeah.
It's been too long.
Yeah.
Speaking of too long, the Sixers also suck. Not breaking any news here. For for a team that we thought would be different in this next iteration, when you bring in all the veterans, you bring in Paul George, and you bring in those guys in the offseason, they are atrocious. They are like a hard, and not for nothing, but like the NBA is a hard watch in general right now.
Yeah.
They're sitting in 12th place at 20-36, and the games are borderline unwatchable. You have a game last night in which all three of your top guys are healthy enough to play, and you lose to the Nets and a Nets team that doesn't have really anybody. I don't even know if there's a window for this team to. I think you could give this team the next 25 years, and I don't know if it would happen. I don't even know what to say. Talk to me about the sad state of the Sixers.
And I don't know if you can tell on the camera, but you said Sixers, and I'm not even kidding. My left eye started to twitch. I was like, just what a disaster! Like this year, I mean, we've said on other Drunk on the Court shows, Don, like we probably undersold some of the potential pitfalls of this season in the summer when they acquired Paul George and things like that. We're like, oh, they'll stay. You got to stay healthy.
I was definitely drinking the Kool-Aid.
No, I think we both were. It wasn't like we're like, oh, they got to stay healthy, but this is a talented group. And for the most part, when Maxey, George, and Embiid play, they've gotten some. It's weird to say that they've gotten, considering the general state of the team, but like they've gotten some results. But the problem has been they haven't really played it all together, and depth was a severe issue for this group. And Jarrett McCain was a pleasant surprise this year as a rookie. Came in, played really well. He's done for the year, so it's like that went out the window. And there it's really like this is like at the absolute worst case scenario how this has played out this year. I I don't know how you get that back on the rails, even with a top pick. Because then you're bringing that top pick into this environment. You have to somehow shift, I think, the offensive focus to like your Maxi McCain, like,
Mhm.
moving forward, like where it's like the offense isn't really built around Joel because he's just not available that much. So it's like you have to somehow go to that. You have to, and that's hard to do. And guys don't like that when guys don't get their touches and things like that. Like then it starts to become players get frustrated, and um, it's yeah. I think we undersold how the potential pitfalls. But I even like the most negative fan, I don't think could have looked at this summer and thought that this would go in this direction. This has been an absolute disaster,
I mean, you talk
unmitigated
about a team
disaster.
that's lost 9 out of their last 10.
Yeah,
They've lost their last 7. Um, I don't know, and Eric, you can speak to this. I don't know how you don't look at the health of Joel Embiid right now and just say, hey, shut him down, get whatever surgery you need to get, whatever cryogenic chamber, hyperbaric chamber, whatever you need, we're gonna do. We're gonna ship you off to whatever country has the best performance institute possible, and just get him as like shut him down and get him as healthy as you can possibly be. Get get anybody that's going to be productive off the court. Let them get healthy. Be as bad as you possibly can be so that you can secure that top pick. Talk to me about if you're in charge, what's the plan between now and April?
Selling the team. Um, no, it's just like, I mean, I genuinely can't think of a normal Sixers season or off season. Like, I think really like going back, I think like as far back as like the Andrew Bynum signing, like there has been something weird that has happened every off season or every season where it's just like, is this real life? Like this, there has to be some curse put on this franchise. Um, I mean, you just got to reset, right? I mean, if I'm in charge, I'm resetting. Shutting down Embiid, regretting giving Paul George a nickel, and then like you guys said, like I think you have to at this point kind of start thinking like you got to start building around Maxey and McCain because you don't know what Joel's long term health is going to be. He's always been kind of an injury prone player, but this is the like I mean, even in the past when he was injured. And that, but he would come back, and when he was healthy, like he was a dominant player all the time. I mean, last night
Mm-hmm.
he didn't play in the fourth quarter because it's. I mean, I'm guessing it's probably because of his knee why he's playing. So but he's not performing right now, and it's just like he's a shell of himself. So I think you shut him down, get him healthy, and hope to God he can come back and do something next year because he does have that. He has that contract and everything. But I think you're right. You have to start looking at building around McCain and Maxey because you have to factor in he's not going to play a ton. But something needs to happen because this is like the games are. You said it, Don, like borderline unwatchable. I'll sit down and I'll like put it on, and I'm like, okay, what else is on TV? Like I need to find something else because it's just so frustrating and pathetic to watch. Yeah, so I think a total reset is the only answer here.
I mean, it's like when I'm checking the box score and I'm looking at names like Lonnie Walker, who just got signed,
got signed. Yeah,
is playing 10 minutes.
Yeah,
Ricky Council played almost 10. I don't even know who David Rowdy is. A guy named David Rowdy wearing number 45 played last night and played 5 minutes. Quentin Grimes plays 37 minutes
that's a lot of time.
and he holds the ball a lot. And you have him on the court at the same time as Tyrese Maxey, who needs the ball in his hands.
yeah.
Like you have a guy in there who is taking away scoring opportunities from your best player. And maybe that's the plan, right?
Yeah.
Like I just, I you have to be able to look yourself in the mirror at this point and go, we are not we are going to be, even if they somehow make their way into the playoffs, they are going to be non-competitive in a playoff series. And I don't know how you can look at this. I don't know how you can look at the standings, look at the state of your team, look at the guys that are injured, look at the health of your stars, and look at this and go, we still got a shot. Like if that's what you're doing, then I would argue with you that the Sixers brass is pretty delusional. Like I think that like you give yourself an opportunity to get younger, and you give yourself, and the best way to do that is by getting a pick in the top 6, because with guys staying in college a little bit longer, the NBA draft is not nearly as bad as it's been. You see guys at the top of the draft now that are coming in and that are being impact players. I don't think this is like you're not going to bring in a guy and let's just say, one, let's say Cooper Flag comes out. Two, let's say that you get the number 1 pick and you get him. Adding him to this roster is not going to be like, oh, now we're in contention with the Celtics and the Cavaliers. Does it put you in a better position to maybe start to kind of phase into that next, whatever that next iteration of this team is? I think so. You build around Maxey and McCain and a guy like that who can be versatile down low, versatile on the wing, whatever, puts you in a better position moving forward. But it's just it is very, very strange to see how this process kind of played out. Because for a while, right, they had opportunities at the tops of these drafts, and they had some real big whiffs. Namely Jason Tatum, right? You have the opportunity to you take Markelle Fultz, right? You have an opportunity to you take you take Jahlil Okafor, you take Nerlens Noel, you name the litany of guys that they swung and missed on. And Embiid was their best shot at being it, but now the evolution of the game, the way that it's being played with an 82 game preseason that leads into the playoffs, you're not built to win in the playoffs. And you've seen teams like the Celtics and like the Cavaliers, right? The Cavaliers pivoted real quick, right? They got rid of a guy like Valanciunas. They got rid of Jared Allen. They got rid of all those guys in the center, right? They built this really athletic team that like just chucks up like 1,000,000 threes a night. You just don't have that team. You have, like, if you watch this game, these guys just stand around, and it's really, really, really difficult to watch.
Yeah, I mean, I was watching the Cavaliers the other night. They played they were playing the Knicks, and I mean they're a really athletic group, but they're also very well coached. Like Kenny Atkinson's a good coach. I liked him when he was in Brooklyn when he coached. He coached a lot of teams that were not like flush with talent, but I think the Sixers ran into one of his groups in the playoffs in a first round series.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, a couple years ago.
And they were like a tough out, and they didn't have a lot of talent. The Sixers were going to beat them, but it was like they made that tough. I think they might have won 2 games.
I think they did, yeah.
And that was a team built around, like D'Angelo Russell and Spencer Dinwiddie, and I think Jared Allen was there with the Nets. But the Cavs are super athletic. You look at like some of these teams in the East, that's a common theme, where like they're really athletic on the wings. They have guards that can make plays, and they have like really athletic bigs. Like I think you mentioned the Cavaliers, Don, and I was watching them the other night, and like Evan Mobley's a really, really talented dude. Like, and he can do a lot of different things. The Celtics are a team that's like that. The Knicks have a lot of athleticism. It's just like, and to have like a big that's such a good interior force when he's right in Joel, to just not have that, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like when you're built around that, it just you can't manage that. You know what I mean? You can't manage. There's so much to be said about like the chemistry of
Right.
like when you're playing basketball and using the 82 games as a preseason and things like that. George Maxey and Joel, maybe there's a world where that could have worked, but they needed to learn how to play with one another, and there was just never an opportunity to do that. And and it's not like it's going to get better. You know what I mean? Guys are locked
No.
into contracts, they're making tons of money, and you don't get healthier as you get older, especially not in
Yeah.
basketball. So it's like, you know, I don't know. It's like I had a conversation with a family member about them the other day, and we were talking about what they need to do to like get a top 3 pick. And as you guys were saying about like shutting down Embiid and hitting the reset button, and I had said just kind of like in a joking manner, I was like, I don't even know if I want to shut them down. Just let them keep going out there and just doing whatever they're doing because they stink anyway, and they're probably going to get a top 3 pick whether he plays or he don't play. So it's
Yeah,
like
you don't know. Do you shut them down and then you get you get guys with high energy that are playing well and they start winning games they
winning.
shouldn't?
Yeah, you start winning a
Yeah.
game too that you shouldn't have won, and you're picking 6th instead of 3rd. You know what I mean? And
Yeah.
like,
Yeah, and
eh,
listen, if they get in the lottery, right, they'll have the opportunity to get the lottery ball with the top 3 pick.
mhm.
Um, but listen, as long as you fall within that top 6, they'll keep that pick, which to me has got to be the goal for the rest of the season. How do we secure enough losses to be able to put ourselves in the top 3, or the top 6? All right, gentlemen, on the way out, what happens first? Do the Eagles win another Super Bowl, or do one of these 3 other teams win a championship?
Mm.
I mean, I think the Birds are really in a good position to kind of be that next dynasty. You have some really important players who are still young. You look at like the difference this defense has the difference in this defense compared to years past. And it's like they really had everything kind of firing all cylinders, which is funny because I mean, think back to what week was that? Was that week like 4 against the Bucks when it was just like things? The beginning of the season was was tough, and there was a lot of question marks. But then like after that bye week, they turned it around, and you could really see. I mean, people say what they say about Jalen, but he makes it work. He's got a really good offensive line. The receiving core is there. Obviously, adding Barkley to the mix doesn't hurt things.
Mm-mm.
I would love to say that I think the Phillies would be the next team, but I do think the Birds have a real shot at winning a couple more with some of this roster.
Yeah, yeah. No, I agree. Uh, I think they could win another one before we see one of the other 3 teams win one. Um, I to this day, like till now, you know what I mean? Like, and it's probably going to be that way up until right through next season when football rolls back around again. Like where I just like, it was the term. I'll borrow the term from CJ Gardner Johnson, but I mean, it was the Super Bowl was belt to ass. Like, I mean, just what
It
a
really was.
just like I still can't get over the fact that they did that. Like
Yeah,
to that like just an absolute 4 quarters of just like they just it was incredible. And certainly I can't believe like it's amazing. If you would have asked me 5 to 7 years ago, or longer than that, right? uh, I don't even know that they would have won one. And if you would have asked me then, the fact that they've won 2 in my lifetime is incredible. And that we're talking on this show about the Eagles potentially winning a 3rd Super Bowl and it being like a realistic possibility, I would have never ever thought that. It's incredible. I'm going to say it could happen again before we see the other 3. But I do feel like if the Sixers can get something right and the Phillies can kind of thread the needle here in the next few years, with the Flyers like on their way up, I mean, we could see like a little run for each team where they all kind of do something in the best case scenario where we could have it could be a seasonal thing where we have one parade in fall and another one in the springtime and in summertime. So
Dare I go back 100 years, Mark? The Roaring Twenties could manifest itself. It has the opportunity to be that way. And I think if there's another team that's close, I think it would be the Phillies. I think the Phillies are the next closest team. With the Flyers kind of like on their tails. The Flyers are kind of in a different spot than the Phillies.
sure,
But I think the Flyers could be where the Phillies are in a couple years, in terms of being able to move into that East. And the Sixers, I don't know. That to me is just a franchise. I feel like on some level, Mark, I feel like the Union have kind of almost like overtaken them in terms of not in terms of like the world sports environment, but like in terms of my fandom.
yeah,
I'm more dialed into the Union than I am to the Sixers because if the Union game was on if I could have gotten that on TV last night, I probably would have tuned in.
yeah,
It's just it's a good time for Philly sports, in terms of you got the Phillies game on this afternoon. Have that definitely have that on. Be able to see the green grass and the palm trees, and be able to tune into that and follow them through the spring, and then we'll see how this Flyer season plays out. But it was this little round table thing was a cool thing. I really appreciate you guys jumping on and over the summer, Eric, you and I will be dialed in, going at it every couple weekends with some Phillies content, and Mark will be putting a bow on the Flyers and Sixers, when as their seasons start to kind of come to a close in the summer. But gentlemen, really appreciate having you on, and tell them where they can find your stuff.
Go ahead, Mark.
You can find all my stuff at firedupsports.com. I'm on X and Instagram at Ramos Reports. Do a daily Ramos Roundup with all 5 Philly sports teams. That comes out every Monday morning. And I'll be on I'll finish up on the Flyers beat this year. My first season covering the team in person, and you can find that at Fired Up Sports as well. And then this summer I'll be down at Subaru Park covering MLS and the Union season here. So that's where you can see all my stuff. So
yeah, I cover mostly just the Phillies on That Ball's Out of Here. So now with baseball season picking back up, should be putting out some more stuff. It's funny, this off season was tough to get some was tough to get some articles out there. There wasn't a ton going on, but now with spring training and some stuff happening now, I'll be a little bit more active there. So I'm on Twitter, Blue Sky, and Facebook with that stuff. So.
All right, fellas. Well, on the way out, I feel like it's only appropriate because they just had a parade. We'll let them go Birds on the way out.
yeah, go Birds.
All right, go Birds.
Birds.
Swinging a miss, struck him out. The Philadelphia Phillies are 2008